Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to our Wednesday night webinar brought to you by NOCD. If you're looking for help for OCD or related conditions, check us out at NOCD.com. That's NOCD.com. We work with people who have OCD and related conditions such as body-focused repetitive behaviors, hoarding, tics. We do help with trauma. We do help with anxiety and mood issues. And we also have one of my favorite things, our NOCD 411 sessions. If you want to talk to an expert about OCD, but you might have a friend or family member who's not quite ready for primetime therapy, but you'd like to get some information about how to be supportive to that person, we have that available as well. We take tons of insurances and we're always working on getting more. And we do work in the US and Canada and the UK and Australia. But check us out if you're even not from those places. Let's see if we can help you. All right. Well, we have an array of wonderful panelists tonight. So I'm going to let the three of them introduce, and we'll go in the order that they came onto the stream. So Mackenzie, I'll start with you, then we'll go to Devon, and then to Alyssa. So go ahead.
Hi, I'm Mackenzie. I am a support group host for NOCD, and I also have obsessive compulsive disorder. So happy to be here as always, and can't wait to answer some questions.
Awesome.
Hi, I'm Devon Garza. I'm a licensed professional counselor based in Arizona. I have generalized anxiety disorder myself, and I specialize in OCD, trauma, and related conditions with NOCD.
And I am Alyssa Lentz. I'm also a licensed professional counselor based in Wisconsin. I also have OCD. I was diagnosed in 4th grade. Was never an OCD specialist until like 3 years ago, so I'm excited to be here.
Well, and I'm thrilled to have all of you here. Why are there the three of you here? Are we celebrating something today, maybe? Maybe this is part of our theme? What is our... I'll let the three of you introduce why we're here today.
Women's History Month.
Oh, very nice. Exciting. And as we want to do the first of the month, whenever we get into our new months, we want to celebrate the things that are being celebrated that month. Last month, we did Black History Month. We have Women's History Month. We'll do all sorts of things coming up, too. So I'm really excited to have the three of you here. And I will play kind of host to things, but I'm going to turn it over to the three of you tonight to really chat and to talk about OCD and anxiety. And I'll just throw out kind of a beginning question and let you riff on it. But what do you think are some of the unique aspects of dealing with OCD or anxiety from the perspective of women history, those types of things?
Yeah, I think that some of the times that my OCD has been really loud and really overwhelming are when I was pregnant. And then also we were kind of talking before we started when you're on your cycle, which plays into the hormone aspect of obsessive compulsive disorder. I think for me too, when I was pregnant, my OCD was like, oh, yay, another thing to latch onto. Right now, I'm not only is it me, but it's this child that I'm carrying. And I always say too, like the worst thing that could have ever happened is that my midwife gave me her cell phone number. And that was when I was not in ERP therapy, not on medication. So luckily those texts can just stay buried because
To kind of counter that, for me with OCD, getting pregnant was something that I avoided. Like it was not going to happen because OCD latched onto it from the get-go. Like all the bad things that would possibly happen with that would just constantly flood my mind.
Yeah, super relatable.
Like you all have mentioned, I think there's a lot of biological differences and things to pay attention to about different components that our bodies and mental health and physical health can interact. I think there's also a really strong social component about different messages that women are given throughout our lifetime about how we show up in society and in families and in relationships. And I think that I see often a distinction between the way the same core themes of OCD will show up for people, but the nuances will often be different. And I see that an often difference between the ways it shows up in the presentations. And a lot of times we get really in the weeds about specific things and whether or not they're fair or unfair, and the importance of zooming out and seeing the process of OCD being very similar across presentations and people.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point because OCD doesn't discriminate based on anything, and all subtypes come to everyone. So there are none that are just exclusive to any particular group or race or gender or orientation or identity or anything like that. OCD is an equal opportunity screwer with your life. Let's just make that very, very clear that it will do that. When you're working with people, what do you notice some certain themes that come up that maybe being a partner or a mother or an aunt or a grandmother or are there some unique things that you hear that you might not hear from male clients that you're working with?
I hear a lot of responsibility to make sure everybody is okay and safe and healthy, and just this overarching theme of being like the one that has to make sure everything is okay.
I will add on to that one. I think responsibility is an important component of a lot of different themes. And I think that coupling that with the expectations of women, especially in families, but just in carer roles, and a lot of times the gender roles that fit into there's often a basis of responsibility, and OCD loves exploiting it and taking advantage of it. And I think we can see that in slightly different nuanced ways about different themes and subtypes, such as more taboo thoughts will often have a lot more of a component of, oh gosh, this is applying to me in my carer role versus if I might have taken more of a sidelined kind of role. I think I would agree with Alyssa. Responsibility is the most common way I see that.
Yeah, I think too, something I always try to remind people is there's a lot of shame in any theme with OCD. And so, I always say, like, I have a fruit salad of themes. I have a little bit of everything. But contamination OCD is my ride or die. And so, like, the shame that comes with, there were times where, like, I didn't even feel like I could give my kids a bath because I was worried about a brain-eating amoeba, or, and the responsibility of giving them the bath and that happening, or, like, there's just so much shame. And I think, like, this, just the idea around being a mom and being a protector, and, what our role is as a mom. And I remember, like, the first thing I said to my exposure response therapist was, when my driving OCD was loud, what kind of mom am I that I can't drive a mile down the road to take my kid to school? And it wasn't that I couldn't, it was that I wouldn't, right? But that feeling, that shame, that, like, guilt really fueled my OCD.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that shame hits heavy because with everything, as a mom, you want to do well for your child. And then OCD gets really loud. So then I hear a lot about, like, am I failing as a mom because OCD is getting loud? And now I feel like I'm kind of spiraling out of control.
Yeah.
As a non-mom, I think that it's also important to recognize a lot of times not having that familial connection, and especially depending on the culture that you grow up in and your family culture and societal culture and messages, there is often a lot of implication that that's the way it's supposed to be. And I think that OCD can cut a number of different ways with saying you should be doing these, and the fact that you're not, there's something wrong with you or wrong with it, or it's not okay, it's unacceptable. I think it also can cut, kind of like Alyssa was mentioning, is I can't do this. I often hear I can't bring someone into this world and put them through the things that I've been through, or there's no way that I could get through a pregnancy or raising a family. And I think it's very important that I'm valuing the inclusivity. It doesn't discriminate, that finding the value of the person and then finding out how OCD is preventing them from doing the things that they want to, including people who would be either chosen voluntarily child-free or involuntarily child-free, having a lot of different complicating factors from anxiety in that.
Yeah, I think the child-free thing is interesting too, because OCD grab on guilt with that and say, well, why aren't you a mom? Isn't that what your, society says you're supposed to do is be a mom? And, I remember for, Susan and I, after the first thing that happened when she got sick was the hysterectomy. So we never had children, but it would be Mother's Day. And if we were out, people would just be at stores and be like, oh, happy Mother's Day, happy Mother's Day. And how terrible she felt because she didn't even have the ability to have a child, and the guilt that she felt without OCD there. So I can imagine, like, what if it's a choice not to have a child? And is it okay to make that choice or not make that choice? I mean, there's a lot that goes with that, right?
And a lot of triggers like that just come up unexpectedly, where people just assume things of you because of being a female.
Yeah. How many kids do you have?
Yeah. Like, why don't you have more kids? Why don't you have no kids? When are you going to have kids?
Still to this day get that one. Oh, it hasn't happened yet. Oh, you aren't ready. And I will recognize, I don't think it's anybody's business, and I'm very strong in my boundaries and my communication, and to the point of I would do some exposures if you saw me talking to people saying this is none of your business. But there is always that underlying message. I walk away from something thinking, ooh, is that how I wanted to handle that? Ooh, could I have been more gentle or more informative or more this or more that, and talk about replaying, reviewing, checking, making sure that my communications and my interactions were acceptable and communicative. Oh goodness, that's a whole can of worms that can get opened.
There's a lot in the scroll right now about hormones and PMDD and OCD. So, we've never really talked about that very much, actually, now that I think about it on this show. So I would love to hear more from the three of you about, what you've seen in your own experiences or in your work with people, and how some of that has come about.
That's fascinating, because Devon and I were just talking with somebody in our work chat. They were asking about if it can change in severity during different cycles. And I see it all the time with every single woman that I work with. I always ask them if it aligns with their cycle, just because I say, like, knowledge is power. Like, if we know it's a certain time in your cycle and your anxiety increases, then we can be prepared and be more proactive instead of reactive when it comes to treating the OCD.
Yeah, I love that idea of, like, being proactive. I think, like, understanding that when we're sick, or, we're moving, or we have a new job, like, all of those things are huge triggers for OCD. I mean, anything is, but then knowing, okay, well, like, my cycle is about to start, like, I know my OCD is going to be louder. So I think, like, you lean into, like, a lot of self-compassion and, being kind to yourself, and knowing that you may or may not give in to some compulsions where you normally wouldn't, and to kind of give yourself grace in those aspects too.
I actually build it in when we're doing the fear and response list, which is one of the first actions we do to build a hierarchy in therapy for ERP, especially in OCD, is I will ask people when they're doing their fear and response to identify time and date that certain things happened, if they can, just for tangibility. I'll say, you might notice that certain things seem to happen in cycles. Like Sunday night, we seem to have a lot more thoughts and fears about what might happen this next week because we're getting ready for the work week. Or during certain phases of your cycle, you might recognize this thing happening differently. And I think I think that there's so much just societal discomfort talking about menstruation and just the process of the way bodies work, but especially women's bodies. And a lot of times people will immediately kind of like shirk against me, saying like, oh no, we don't talk about that. I'm not going to talk to you about my cycle. And I'll say, that's perfectly fine, but do me a favor and track it, because the more you know about it, we can start to prepare. Hey, it's probably going to start activating a little bit more in these next coming days. And if I can just share one more thing, I was working with a preteen girl who was starting menstruation, and it was very irregular. That we had some starts and some stops, and she was still learning about the process. And it was really helpful for me to just say the words out loud. Hey, let's start tracking that with other things. Let's track your mood. Let's track what's happening bodily and a few other things. She had never realized that could be having an impact on her mental health and her OCD and anxiety. And just to simply have that immediately took some of the pressure off. We then had to figure out how to cope with it, because it continued to be an ongoing process, but it allowed some of that, this is part of it. I can work with this now.
Yeah. Grace said, my period and my OCD are besties.
Oh yeah.
That is truth.
Also, like, it's one of those things, like, OCD doesn't come like knock on the door like, hey, like, I'm gonna take a week off, I'm just gonna give you some space, like, I know you're gonna have a hard week, here's a heating pad, some ibuprofen, I'll be back in a week. No.
No, it comes in with a vengeance.
Very bulldozing through, just I'm here.
I like that. OCD with a heating pad. That's funny. Let's see. There's a couple of people here who talk about, even things that, if I could find it. One person says, my husband has here's JW. My husband has retroactive jealousy and asks several questions about my past. It leads to even more questions. How can I respond and process this? I see this in both ways, right? I've worked with males who have this. I've worked with women who have this. This is again one of those things that is just we don't care who you are, but since we're talking about it from this angle tonight, this is an interesting question.
I have found an interesting nuance between individuals and their partners talking about what their beliefs about appropriate, relationships or sexual behaviors or sexual past. There's language has changed. It probably always changes, but there's definitely been some difference in language change, like body count and things like that. There are specific words that seem to get attached to this. And I think that there are gender differences between a person's past before they enter a relationship and ways that anxiety and OCD will latch onto it and make meaning out of it and create circumstances like jealousy and confessing and needing to prove and confirm and reassurance. I see that both ways, but I think that there's a nuance depending on what the belief system in the relationship is.
Mm-hmm.
I always like to pose the question, like, what's the function of this? What are we going to gain from going backwards and revisiting all of that? We're in the relationship in the here and now, and that's important to focus on.
Mm-hmm. Got to watch that slippery slope, because once you start going down that road, it really is a no-win. I've never met anyone who felt better after having these discussions based on retroactive jealousy, right? It's never been like, oh yeah, we really feel so much better about each other now. It's always though. Kind of the
worst. Very much mirrors the OCD cycle, where then you're just caught up asking more and more, and then you're feeling more terrible as time goes on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
One consideration I might have for this question in particular, how do I respond and process this, is aligning with your partner against the shared issue, which is needing the certainty, needing the resolution, needing to make these things happen. And depending on, who's presenting with the need and the requirement, kind of coming up with some agreements and some rules of engagement of, these are the ways that we will talk about these things that are OCD informed, ERP informed, versus these are things that are just keep rehashing, replaying that cycle. And that's something that we're going to disengage with. I'm going to disengage with. You might not be fond of it. And then we're having a different discussion of how to tolerate that. But creating some ground rules of how we will and will not interact with each other's anxiety.
Mm-hmm. There's also, let me see. There's so much. Everyone's I love the scroll, because everybody becomes very supportive of everybody else in there. So that's what's really nice. Here's a good question. Meg comes in and says she's been feeling worse, losing her mind, making progress, but really feels like she wants to do something bad. Reassurance doesn't work anymore. Nothing seems to make her feel better. She knows it's probably other compulsions she's doing. She has harm and magical thinking, OCD. It feels 100% real, like it can't see reason, only a little bit. I always love when we talk about it feels real, and I have that conversation all the time. But I'd love all the three of your take on this notion of how OCD feels real.
I always, when I think about this, I think about like hit and run OCD, right? And that feeling of like when I'm telling myself like I have to keep driving and not turn around, like I think about how real that feels in the moment, how like irresponsible and just like completely egotistonic it feels to just keep driving. And I think about when we're talking about like harm OCD and, you know, people, I think a big thing people get stuck on is like, oh, like, you know, I'm driving over the bridge. What if I just, whoop, you know, swerve right off it? And I think it's just, it's one of those things where OCD does such a good job isolating us and making us feel like we're the only ones that have experienced those thoughts. And I think it's fascinating to learn, right, that everyone has intrusive thoughts. And it's just that, you know, we get so stuck on them. And what does that say about me as a person? Does that mean I want to harm my kids because they're in the car? But I get, you know, OCD latches on to what we value most, and that makes it feel so real.
I always tell people it has to feel real, because if it didn't, I wouldn't have a job. So.
Yeah, that too.
This is all for Dr. McGrath, y'all. All of you.
You're welcome.
If I can take your sentence and you know, tweak it a little bit, is it has to feel real or else it doesn't get our attention. And exactly. I will often describe OCD's job, its sole purpose in life is to get us to pay attention and to feed it through compulsion. And if it can't get us to care about something, we're not going to feed it. It's not going to work and get our attention. So a lot of times I'll ask people to think about all of the other intrusive thoughts that they've had throughout the day that didn't get fed. Why did they not get fed? Why did they not get our attention? Why did we not pay attention to them? Because they weren't salient, they weren't relevant, they weren't strong energy, emotion. They probably were not attacking our values. And then I have a very snarky style. So afterward, I focus a lot on inhibitory learning. And I'll ask people, so how many times did you almost die this past week?
Oh, yeah.
And just really going forward, because in the moment it does feel so real, and it does. Oh no, you don't understand. This one is different. This is the one that's going to get me. And I don't forget the majority of the times I almost died. And so when people think back, like, well, I didn't die anytime. Oh, and by the way, I forgot to tell you, I did this really big exposure. That is our indication that it feels real in the moment. And when we don't engage and feed it, it gets bored and it moves on with its life.
Yeah, OCD is an almost disorder. Like, I almost died. I almost ran people over. I almost murdered someone. I almost molested a child. I almost. Yeah.
I had $1 for every illness that was going to take me out.
Well, same. I'd be rich.
Oh, yeah.
I just want to add that it feels real part. I feel it is important, because if you're able to tell, you know, it feels real, you know it's OCD. And that awareness piece is key, right? We can't challenge OCD if we're not aware of it being there.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. I think there's so much power in being able to like call OCD out when it's present. And I think the more we do it, like the easier it becomes. But it's like it is empowering, and it gives you this like level of confidence to say, okay, I see you and I'm not engaging with you right now. Like, come along with me if you want, but I'm not playing today. That's hard.
Alyssa, someone threw a challenge out at you. They said, but what about odors? I can't eat because of some odors.
What kind of odors?
Right. I don't know.
Odors are a tough one. Again, it comes down to, you know, do you want to eat the food? Like, is this a food that you really enjoy? And are you going to let OCD steal that experience from you?
What if it doesn't feel like OCD? What if it feels like these odors really are dangerous or bad?
Are you willing to not?
There you go. Yeah.
Are you willing to give that up? Are you willing to not do that? If so, I'm probably not going to convince you otherwise today. I'll keep trying. But for now, are you willing to give that up? Are you willing to have the consequences using this sentence, I can't eat? Are we willing to not eat? I say that a few hours at a time, and then a few hours later, no, I'm not willing not to eat. We're going to push through.
we always have to challenge that can't. What I say to people when they tell me they can't do something, I say, okay, well, we won't work on that then. So what else would you like to work on? And then they backpedal and they go, well, wait. That's why I came to see you, because I want help with that. And I said, well, you just told me you can't do it. So there's really nothing I can do for you, but I'm very good at things that you won't do. So what are things you won't do because you're afraid? I can help you with that. And then they finally go, okay, fine. I don't want to eat if there's certain odors around because I'm afraid, blah, blah, blah. And I said, okay, well, that is treatable then, right? That is absolutely treatable. But if you can't, then we're kind of stuck, right? That's the issue. And we
can't force you to do it.
Absolutely, right. We aren't going to force anybody to do that. Someone else asks, can we go over health anxiety / OCD and social anxiety? So we do a lot of work with various anxieties here. What do you guys want to talk about with that?
Health anxiety is my kryptonite. So I understand that on a very personal level. It's tricky, right? Because your body is with you 24/7. So there's always going to be triggers. And I feel like that makes it a little extra sticky in a sense. And it is a lot of learning to trust yourself versus trusting OCD. Like trusting like there is a problem that is here that I need to address versus a possible problem that could be there, right?
Yeah, I think it's tricky to navigate like the healthy level of concern, and then the OCD has like entered the group chat. And I think that, it's a balancing act, because I think it doesn't feel good to be put in a box, and I don't like to put myself in a box. So becoming confident and knowing like, okay, like I don't feel good. There might be something going on, versus, okay, yeah, that's true, but also maybe OCD is here too. So I think, do you Alyssa, with the pay attention to the urgency piece and that aspect?
Yes, the urgency piece is huge. I tend to say if it's urgent and I'm full blown, I need to figure this out now, that's my red flag that this is OCD, especially if I'm functioning as normal and I'm not visibly dying, I need to delay it. And then I will delay all compulsions and come back. Do I still feel like this needs to be addressed? More times than not, I forget about it after I delay it long enough.
Yeah, I think for me, I think about, say you find a bump and you're okay, well, that's concerning. I'll call the doctor and make an appointment. But then OCD is if you have any cancellations, because 2 weeks is a long time. If you have any cancellations before then, please let me know. And then you go in and get checked and they're we'll call you in 24 hours. And there were times where I would get in the car and call. They'd be okay, when was your appointment? And I'm oh, I just left, but do you have results? Okay, yeah, OCD has shown up.
And just being able to lean into accepting, what the doctor says. I'm choosing to trust the doctor who's the professional and lean into, okay, it's possible they made a mistake. It's possible something else will show up, but I would much rather spend my day focusing on what I enjoy and value than living in this land of what if I'm dying?
Right.
Because at the end of the day, we're all dying, right? And it's just a matter of when and how. But sitting there focusing on it is only going to make us miss out on the things that are really important to us.
And you just said the magic words for me, Alyssa. I will often have people reflect what the core importance is connected to the core fear. And with health anxiety, more often than not, the connection is, I want to live a good life, or I want to care for my family. And I think that there's a strong connection between women and health anxiety. Of course, I see it in non-women as well. But a lot of times it's a connection and an intuition that we're told to listen to, but we're not actually taught how to listen to it. And so I think a lot of times we're told, if there's something wrong, you'll know it, but we don't explain what and why and how. And so helping somebody connect to, it's important to me to live a good life, or it's important to me to care for my family, or if I have kids, not leaving them parentless or something like that, it can help me connect to, I'm already missing out on some of those things now in order to not miss out on those things later. I would like to swap those things that might happen, and I'm going to be present in this moment.
Yeah. And the idea maybe too that worrying about it is worse than the diagnosis itself, right? The anticipation is there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and what Devon said, the like core fear, like mine is death. And so like I always said, I was so afraid of dying that I wasn't living. Like, there was no part
Yes.
that was, and then I'm like, what's the point if I'm, you know, basically becoming what I fear most?
Yeah.
Anxiety, just don't let anything catch on fire. And then it's sitting over here with a flint or a lighter and lighting your curtains on fire and actually setting fire to your house, saying, watch out, you better, I don't know, make sure you don't light that candle or something. Like, no, come on, it's right in front of us. We can put this out.
Yeah. I want to go back to what Barbara brought up with odors too. It could also be Arfid, right? Avoidant and restrictive food intake disorder, where there's some kind of association made with either a texture of a food, a smell, or a situation that you're in, and then you feel as if you can't eat, you can't get it down, you will choke on it, maybe you will gag. And so there are programs out there, and there are people who really do specialize in what we call Arfid, again, avoidant and restrictive food intake disorder, ARFID, who can help people who have this condition really focus on how can I get to eating without this being in the way of my life, right? Because Brenda, I'm going to bet that you want to eat, and that it's really difficult to try to eat if you even smell something. And as we all know, like with anxiety disorders, we become really, really sensitive to something. So we may smell something that nobody else smells. We may hear something that nobody else hears. We may sense something that nobody else senses. Why? Because we're looking for it, right? Even I go to like an OCD, the groinal experience, right? Where I don't know, I might have felt something there. That's good enough for me to then, feel like it definitely did. So there is an aspect of exposure and response prevention therapy that goes along with Arfid, but there are people out there, like I said, who really do specialize in that. So, Brenda, I would seek out people who really specialize in Arfid so that they can help you with that. That's where I would go. What other themes have you all seen that you think are important to really talk about? Like I said, it's fun for me to bring people on at the first week of the month to celebrate various aspects of our culture. So what about from a cultural standpoint should we think about with mental health and women? I think one of the things is how women have been differentially diagnosed in our history, right? Where this idea of neuroses, going back to the original DSM and the nervous breakdown and various things, watching even old commercials, women have special sensitivities, or how women have been advertised to in our society. There was a commercial on a reel today that was, it was from Maxwell House Coffee in 1967, and it was a woman was trying to get in the way of her husband and the architect talking about building the house, and he basically said, if you want to be helpful with the house, make us Maxwell House. It was like, holy shit. I was like, oh my God, that was a commercial.
Awful.
Yeah. So I was disturbed, I have to tell you.
Wait, that's a recent commercial?
No, it was 1967.
Okay.
But
that's
not
long enough ago.
That's still not long enough ago, yeah. So I wonder, how about from the historical context and even for what you've seen in the field or growing up to what you learned about mental health or how you were supposed to be as children to where you are today? I think that'd be an interesting, just what's the evolution been?
Well, I have a kind of question off that is that, do you feel like with the three of y'all, do you feel like OCD is misdiagnosed? I mean, a lot of times it's misdiagnosed, but maybe more so in women, possibly. I I think about when mine really got bad, and I was afraid of eating like with my hands, and then I felt like everything was contaminated, so I wasn't eating at all. And I felt like it was really easy for people to just say, "Oh, it's an eating disorder," or it's, instead of getting to the root of it, I guess. So I'm curious about that. Do you think like culturally, like it's more misdiagnosed in women possibly?
I don't know if I have like data or evidence for it, but anecdotally, I think that the willingness to wave away or explain certain things and attribute it to different causes or roots is really prevalent. Like you mentioned, if there's a food related thing, oh, you probably have an eating disorder. If there's a focus related to body and especially body dysmorphia, oh, well, yeah, all women have that you're supposed to be skinny and cute. That's how our society works. Finding overlap between OCD and neurodivergence, there's a really huge gap between appropriate assessment, diagnosis, and treatment, particularly in women of neurodivergent considerations, whether it's, autism spectrum disorder, ADHD, learning disabilities, all sorts of different considerations. I think that there are huge gaps. And what I was going to say to Dr. McGrath's question was, recognizing how our society has so much research that is not diverse. When we think about like medical research, it is primarily middle-aged white men. So we don't necessarily have a lot of depth across people of color or women or ages or other inclusive diverse groups. And so
orientations, identities. Right. Yes.
It's very normative against groups, against the majority. It is normative to a minority group in its lack of inclusivity and awareness, physical and mental health, I think is really important.
Mm-hmm. And it's been great, like Eric Storch's lab has been working on trying to do a great amount of work and collect data from, like the Hispanic Latino population to really get a lot of good baseline for OCD in that cultural world. So I'm thrilled to see people are doing that. We know Monica Williams and is working. Caitlin Pinciotti is doing great work. There's a lot of people who now are just really jumping in, and Monica's even helped take the reins on a BTTI that is going to be about BIPOC focused BTTIs, and there's just some great work out there. So I'm excited that the OCD community and the research community are in line and making sure that we get the full spectrum of all of that. It's really, really important.
I think I've lost the thread, but one thing I wanted to bring up, I had a member share this with me, and I very much recognize they're valid in it. One of the fears was around driving, and the language that they used is, seatbelts are not developed for women, specifically around breasts and stomach and things like that, and bone structure and things like that. And they legit said to me, you can't tell me that a car is safe to drive in because I have a seatbelt and I'm doing my thing. This isn't made for me. I said, you're not wrong, but we're also going to try to find a way to live our values and proceed with our activities the best way that we can. And I think that's the kind of stuff that can undermine confidence if we try to focus on building confidence, we will sometimes fall short in that way, because the reality is there isn't a confidence to build on in the greater scheme.
Mm-hmm. Alejandra says, can you talk more about contamination OCD? My wife just took the first step in booking her appointment with a therapist, but what can I do in the meantime to help her?
I think just by being here and asking that question, you're already doing so much and stepping up as a support system. I think the biggest thing, and y'all correct me if I'm wrong, but in my own recovery journey was my family members and loved ones learning the support I needed versus the support my OCD wanted. And I think that when I allowed my family members to be a part of that journey, it was like an accountability partner, and it helped me so much to get to the point where I am now.
Just learning about OCD, learning about how to not accommodate it, to speak on what Mackenzie said, is huge. That was a big thing with my husband. He had to learn how to not provide me reassurance, not respond to OCD or do things for me so that Like if I tried to avoid a door handle, he wouldn't let me avoid it once I got to that point in treatment because, no, you're touching that door handle so that OCD doesn't get stronger. So really, truly just learning about it and learning as she goes on how to help her not feed OCD is going to help her tremendously.
And letting the person drive the conversation. I think a lot of really well-intentioned people say, oh, from this point forward, I'm not accommodating any of these things. And doing that in such a dismissive and rip away does not encourage the person to build their own confidence and competency with it. And I tend to see people being way too careful of, no, I'm not willing to rock the boat, or that's it, from tomorrow, we're doing all of these things. So really prioritizing letting the person be in the driver's seat and then getting input from the therapist and from the family and coming up with a collaborative accommodation plan. The other thing I would suggest that people have found really helpful is modeling things. You're about to do this exposure. Let me show you what that would look like for me, and giving them like, here, I'm going to do it for you a couple times just to show it. Okay, now your turn. It's basically how we teach any person to do any new thing. I'll show you, then I'll let you try it, do it this way. I think that there's a lot of language of like, well, this is your problem. You got to find a way to deal with it. And instead, let me be there and support you, not taking the power away from you, but supporting you in your biggest cheerleader. I believe in you. You can do this.
I think learning to like, you can empathetically hold a strong boundary too. Like we cannot give reassurance as, loved ones, but we can also be empathetic and understanding. And also I think everybody's different. Everybody's relationship and like the dynamic of it is different. We're like very dry humor, tough love. I think Dr. McGrath, I told you before, like my therapist gave my husband a huge virtual high five because, I was my OCD when it was my hit and run. I was like, do you think that I hit someone? He's like, oh, I don't know. I wasn't paying attention, but I'm getting in the shower. If the cops knock on the door, like you got it. But like everyone is going to be different and handle things differently, but that worked for me. Yeah.
As the mother of a son with OCD, I almost feel like I'm OCD researching, trying to help him, right? I know for us, when we're working with parents, there's a few things that come up that I see. One is they want to blame themselves for the fact that their child has OCD. What did I do that was wrong? Was it my genes? Was it my environment? Or was it just I'm a bad parent or something like that? And I don't know if that makes it easier for them to deal with or what, but you see a lot of blame. And then the other piece is, of course, all parents would want to know what they could do the best for their child, but there does come a point where I wonder if maybe we pull away from the research and we go into actual doing of things instead of researching things. So where does that fall for you guys?
Well, my oldest, who's 7, just had her first appointment with NOCD yesterday. And so I think you definitely go through like blame, like clearly genetically, like, hi. But, I think perspective switch too, kind of, okay, well, like I'm going to find purpose in the pain and I'm going to learn how to use my journey to help her, or step away from the researching and listen to the therapist and the provider, and how can you directly help in this specific situation versus all this outside research and noise, I guess.
Yeah, and taking into account the research only goes so far. It's not ever going to be unique to like your child or your specific situation. So being able to step outside of that and really look at what can we actively do in the here and now to help you beat this.
Nicholas says his wife has contamination. OCD is struggling mostly around pregnancy. She's stuck in an everyday, all-day ritual cycle because of it. He's not sure what to do. She's hesitant to start therapy, right? Well, that's where I love our NOCD 411 sessions purposely. Nicholas, you could sign up for one of those. We would be happy to chat with you and go really in depth on some ideas and things. But what are some things for the three of you that you would talk about helping to motivate someone, or things that Nicholas might be able to do? Or if Nicholas, your wife is listening, I think have her come over and listen to these three amazing people give you some tips right now.
This was probably one of the most painful parts for me was how loud my OCD was when I was pregnant and with contamination OCD. And, there's a lot of shame within that for me. Like if I felt like I ate something that wasn't safe, I throw it up, like versus, eating it and moving forward. And, I think that it's amazing to have the resources and to be, able to start therapy and work on it. And NOCD does an amazing job giving out information and connecting people to therapy, like Dr. McGrath was saying with a 4-on-1 session. But yeah, I think some of the toughest parts of my journey were when I was pregnant. And I don't know, you guys are the professionals, but I would assume that the hormones have a lot to do with that because it was so much louder. But yeah, it's definitely difficult for sure.
If she's hesitant, I'm going to go off on a whim here that she's entertaining the idea of it. Yeah. So maybe going over like a pros and cons list of, really what are the cons of just trying one session? The worst thing is you go in and you're like, nope, it's not for me right now. You may even still at that point walk away with some really good knowledge and something tangible to start working with on your own.
We can't make you do anything. We couldn't if we tried.
But we can plant the seeds. That's something I like to always say is like, even if somebody is on the fence, plant the seeds. Give them the information, do the pros and cons with them. Then it's gonna grow. They're gonna think about it, water it, and it's up to them really what they're gonna do with it.
Yeah.
And that's what you would be afraid of happening. What would the fear of attending a first appointment or a second or doing an ERP or something like that? That's what I meant by we can't make you do anything.
Yeah.
We're here to plant the seed and entertain it, but we're not going to force you to do anything. We're not here trying to hurt you. And I think there might be a component without knowing the details for y'all. There might be I'm not willing to share the thoughts that I'm having because I think that you might, make me go to a hospital, or you might lock me away, or you might decide I'm a bad parent, or you'll take my child away. And just the likelihood of those more extreme consequences and fears being attached to it, trying to have a really honest conversation of what are we afraid of happening if we do. And then talking to one of us at our first session, we explain, here's what we're not going to do if you tell us these kinds of things. This is a safe space to do this. This is your confidentiality permissions and all of those things, to learn that we can start talking about it and even just get the ball rolling slowly. If you leave, you might come back. It might be worth trying.
Before, we've got about 12 minutes. Before we wrap up, what are some of your go-to pieces of advice that you find are just like, that little nugget was really awesome? And how do you incorporate that into support groups, into individual therapy sessions, into your own lives? And what could others learn from those things?
You can do hard things. People regularly say to me, I heard you in my head saying, you can do hard things. And so finding a way to just continue that mantra. I don't know if I can do hard things, but I'm willing to find out. I bet I can do hard things. We'll have to see. Starts to evolve into, I can do hard things. I keep showing that I can do hard things. I'm going to keep doing hard things.
I think kind of what you were saying at the beginning, Devon, too. I wake up every day and I'm like, OCD cannot thrive without my participation. And I live in that, because if I give in to the compulsions, then I'm fueling the OCD. So I try to remind myself of that for sure. That we hold more cards and more power than OCD likes to let us believe. And I think the other thing too is, no matter how OCD decides to show up, we fight it the same way, and we can do it because we've done it before. So it shows up as harm OCD today, contamination OCD tomorrow. We fight it the exact same way every single time.
Yeah, I always like to say compulsions create more compulsions. So just knowing like we actively have that choice, which I feel like for me, it always felt like I didn't have a choice what I was thinking about, what I was doing as far as compulsions go. So really just stepping aside and embracing, no, I actually do have a choice. Do I want to actively do this compulsion or not? And then knowing like if I do this compulsion, it is going to lead to more compulsions. That's just what happens with OCD. But that choice part is key, right? We do have a choice, and I try to empower every member that I work with on that, just embracing like we have a choice. We can actively decide to listen to OCD or to try and challenge it and do the things that we want to do that actually bring value to our life.
There are OCD lies. One of my favorite is, "This is the last one," or "This will be the last time." Has that played a role in anyone's life at all? Or even with GAD too, Devon? Yeah.
It's never the last time. And if anything, it gets sneakier. You know, it's like, it's the last time. And then you think it's the last time. And there it goes, sneaking up in a way it hasn't before, because you're keeping it activated. Every compulsion you do just keeps it activated, keeps OCD strong.
Yeah, I always say in support groups, I'm like, y'all let me know if it's different for you, but I have never reached the end of the OCD thread. I've never gotten to the point where OCD is like, you did it. I will never like come to you about that one again. You know, you've won boss level, you win, complete, done, never coming up again. Yeah, it's never going to be one ever.
Mm-hmm.
It can feel a little bit burdensome, but I choose to do it in an empowering way of anything can get me. Crap, anything can get me. That sounds really scary. Well, actually, no, anything can get me. Okay, that's kind of good to know. Anything can. So my task is to go through my life, do the things that I want to do my values, do the stuff that I don't like doing but needs to get done for living in this world. Do the thing that I want. And then when something pops up and says, no, I'm new, or no, I'm different, or hey, it's me again, being able to listen to the ways that I've paid attention to my anxiety in the past, and the language, it uses the same language. It's wearing one of those disguise hats, but it's the same old language. And being able to say, oh, hi, you're back. I've been waiting for you. Come along. We're doing values congruent behaviors. I don't wait for it to come get me like a jump scare. I'm expecting it to join me on my journey at any point. And days go by that it doesn't seem to, or at least I don't notice it. And then it'll jump out of nowhere. It'll jump a little bit and say, oh, good, you're back. And that feels really paradoxical to welcome it and kind of talk to it kindly, because we talk about it being the enemy so much, but being able to say like, oh, hey, I've been expecting you. Come on, we're going to the grocery store today. Hey, I'm hanging out with some friends. I got to go to work now. Actually filtering it and really just treating it like irreverently, like, oh, you again? All right, let's go. Come on.
For some reason, when you said that, all I can think of is Mean Girls when she's like, get in, loser, we're going shopping. Like,
I regularly use the get in, loser, we're doing ERP.
Get in, loser, we're going to ERP. Get
in, loser, we're licking trash cans. Let's go.
I love that. I like to encourage people once they're far enough along where they're having these moments, these breaks from OCD being really loud, to just try to notice like the funny or creative ways it tries to get your attention and laugh at it. Like, oh, I see you over there. That was creative. Just to bring in a little bit of humor to separate yourself from the OCD.
I call my anxiety Billy Bob. So it really helps. I'm like, what's up, Billy Bob? I haven't seen you in a minute. Where you been? What you got for me today? Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, I called mine Bertha. So I'm like, hey, Bertha, nice to see you today.
So I called mine Karen, and then someone told me, like, it went into this whole thing. It ended up being an exposure for me because somebody named Karen was not happy that I named mine Karen. And so my therapist was like, and we're going to continue to call it Karen. We're going to continue. It's like, oh no.
There's been some questions like hallucinations and how it feels your OCD theme. It could, obviously, that could play some roles. And I would say in that instance, treatment-wise, there's some ERP, but we want to coordinate care with providers too if there are some hallucinations going on, and make sure that the correct medications are also being provided for some of those things. Ben said, with pure OCD, would stopping mental compulsions help the OCD as well? Do you just let the obsessions be? I like that one.
Oh, mental compulsions. Those are so sticky and so rewarding to battle once you can figure out the best way to not engage with them. There's a really good article on the IOCDF about non-engagement responses that is my go-to with everybody about how to strategically essentially shut down OCD mental compulsions.
I use the same one. If you search IOCDF ping pong, it'll come up. I
Yes.
type in ping pong. I don't even know what the actual name of it is anymore, but it's the ping pong link. My go-to non-engagement response with mental compulsions being the main way that mine shows up, mental compulsions and avoidance. And I'm changing the language for anxiety, but it's all about the same. My go-to non-engagement is sarcasm, because I am just a snarky individual. I like to one-up it a lot. So I'll be like, oh, you're telling me this terrible thing? Well, what about a more terrible thing? The more irreverent that I can get, the faster. I call it playing chicken, and I'm not going to lose this game of chicken. I'm a lot stronger than you are. And so I will come at it and be like, I'm walking down the street. You're standing in the middle. I'm going to chunk you out of it. I'm going to shoulder check you. You're going to be the one to move out of my way. So the question was, should we just leave obsessions lie? I don't know how to interrupt the obsession. That's the piece of the cycle that I don't think, if we're trying to interrupt the obsession in the first place, we're probably lost to begin with, because the RP is the compulsion. So going back to the thought is there, the anxiety is there, I'm not going to respond and react to it. And then the obsessions will lessen as we give them less attention. But I keep reminding people, we're not going to measure progress by the lack of thoughts or the lack of sensations or memories or whatever our initial trigger is. And we're not going to measure progress by lack of anxiety yet. We're going to measure progress by our ability to maintain our values and disengage from the compulsion, and the rest will follow, and it does. It does.
I think an aha moment for me was realizing like the thought or the image or the urge isn't the issue, it's our reaction that is. And like once that kind of clicked for me, I was able to navigate through that too. But mental compulsions are so difficult because the only one to hold us accountable is ourselves.
And it feels so it feels natural. It feels like we don't have control over it. Like this is just a normal way to think, which, that's where I do a lot of psychoeducation on the front end of things of, no, that's where we have a choice and we do not have to sit here and spend hours thinking about this.
And I think there are ways to get support with mental compulsions, and it can border on confessing. So we got to be clever about how we do it. But my partner will often say, like, I'm very expressive, so my eyebrows go up, and they'll say, "Hey, eyebrows," and that's my indicator of I'm engaging in a mental ritual. I'm doing something to try to figure out the anxiety, and I'm doing this. And they'll say, "What's up, eyebrows? What's going on?" And in a non-confessing way, I'll say, "I'm having this worry about yada yada." And they know to say, "Oh, dang, that sucks." And that's it. And it feels very invalidating if you don't understand it in the process of non-engagement. But by them saying that sucks, I can say, yeah, it does. Why am I paying attention to this again? And so supports can kick us out of it by bringing it to our attention and saying like, hey, what are you dealing with right now? And how would you like to disengage from it?
Yeah, my husband's always like, your wheels are spinning. I can tell your wheels are spinning. I've checked out. Physically present, mentally long gone.
Mm-hmm.
The day we figure out how to stop a thought will be one of the greatest days in history. Nobody is there, though, because, we have thoughts. They are there. So it isn't about stopping them. It's about learning that I can live with them, right? And boy, that is one of the biggest things that we have to do is just learn that we can handle and live with whatever we have. Well, I want to thank the three of you for joining tonight. That was a quick hour and always a great time to have guests. And thank all of you for joining us as well. If you're looking for help for OCD or related conditions, check us out at NOCD.com. That's NOCD.com, where we work with OCD and things like body-focused repetitive behaviors, tics, hoarding, and various other things too. And if you're looking for help for someone who might not be ready for therapy, you want some support for yourself, we have NOCD 411 sessions. We do work in the US, Canada, Australia, and the UK, and we take more and more insurances all the time. So keep checking back to see what we can cover, because our goal is to try to reach everybody at some point, and we are actively working toward that. So thank you all for joining. I appreciate it, and we will see you again next time.